we're going to cover how to set up a joint position check function. We'll get inside of the pendant. So the purpose of a joint position check is to lock down whatever axis you tell it you want to only move within a certain degree or position. So it functions a little bit like axis limits, but it is not the same. So just real quick on axis limits, I can come in here and change these axis limit values, and then all I have to do is cycle power. With DCS, you have to apply it, and it now becomes a safe signal that gets attached to the position check that you're setting up. So by actually entering in an application code, and then we can monitor the status of that axis inside of our safe IO status, we can send that information to a safety PLC if we need to. So it becomes intrinsically safe. So for joint position check, we're going to go to our DCS menu. This menu, 0next, System, DCS. And we're going to come down to joint position check. So we have 40 different position checks that we can set up on our robot. And we'll go ahead and we're going to give it a comment. We'll call this, we're going to set one up on axis 5. So J5 joint pos check. Then we have to enable it so the robot knows to start looking for it. We tell it what group. So group is going to be what robot is it tied to. This is a single robot cell and it's a single robot system, so we're only ever going to have group 1. If you had like an external axis that's set up on like a group 2, or if you're using multi-group motion on your robot, you'll have more groups to choose from. But then I'm going to set up my axis. So I'm going to do axis 5. And axis 5 is our wrist axis, so it's going to be the one moving up and down. And then we can go ahead and tell it, do we want it to be safe inside our upper and lower limits or outside of our upper and lower limits? So most of the time we do inside. So if we come over and look at our view, right now we have it set up for negative 125 and 125, which is the default axis limits. So that robot can move anywhere in between that range. So when I put some values in here, so to reduce it down to negative 90 and 90. We come back into our view, see how we got these two little bars here? It's going to be allowed to move inside of that range. If we would switch this to outside and go back to our view, now we're only going to be focusing on these points here. So outside of this range. So outside doesn't get used a whole lot. So mainly we focus on the inside range. So stop type, this is going to be how the robot's going to stop. So if we violate that negative 90 or 90 degree and go beyond those 2 points, it's going to either stop immediately, it's going to be a very abrupt stop, or stop category 1, which is like a controlled stop. So the robot will kind of come to a coasting stop. And then not stop means it's just going to be able to monitor the axis and would send a signal when it gets outside of that range. So we'll set it to stop category 0. Usually when we're setting up a joint position check, it's to kind of help prevent and protect against tooling and from crashing into the robot, just to limit it so we don't have any of those issues. We also have the ability to disable this, so when we talk about Safe IO Connect, we can attach a safe signal to it. And if we're like tool changing or we're inside of a certain zone and we want to make sure that we're allowing the robot to move the way that it needs to, we can disable this temporarily if we wanted to. So I'm going to leave the disabler off, and then once we're done, we'll go ahead and we're just going to apply. And then for DCS, you got to make sure you cycle power after you apply. So with joint position checks, you can only do one axis at a time. So it's kind of important to know, because once we get into Cartesian position checks, then we can check different axes or multiples at a time, because it represents the Cartesian coordinates from world rather than just your joint position. So in my robot, you'll see that I get this nice half circle fan shape on my axis 5. So now I'm going to go ahead and jog my robot, and we'll be able to test this out. So once it violates, it's going to switch. I'm going to get an alarm here saying that DCS joint pause limit. So it's number 1, and this is the name of it, J5 joint pause check, and then it's group 1 axis 5. So I should be able to look at this, or look at that fault, and know exactly what axis is the issue. So I'm going to jog it outside of that range, or back into the range, I should say. Now that we're back inside of that range, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Safe IO status. So we can come in and find our JPCs. So here it is, it's the one we created. And once it violates that, it shuts off. So now that's the safety signal that we can tie into our Safe IO Connect menu as an input here, right here. And we can send that signal over to our PLC.